Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, and greetings from California. We're coming to you live this evening from the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda outside Los Angeles. We'll see if you remember hearing this story at any point before. A caravan of impoverished migrants is now making its way up from Central America through Mexico. Their plan is to present themselves at our southern border and demand entry into our country with all the benefits, of course, that entails. The White House has vowed to stop this caravan using the armed forces if necessary, but it keeps coming. Have you heard something like that before? Well, in fact, you have. Something very similar happened just a few months ago. We watched another migrant caravan snake its way up from Central America. It finally arrived, and then the news coverage essentially stopped. But what happened next? Well, here's what happened next. Hundreds of those people in that caravan are still here in the U.S., and if recent history is any guide at all, very few of them will ever leave. Once you reach this country and claim asylum, you're usually home free. Our media don't often cover that, but the rest of the world is watching and knows it very well, and that's why they keep coming. The most recent estimates suggest that a caravan's worth of uninvited migrants arrives at our border every few days. Why is this happening? Because an entire political party is inviting it and encouraging it. They believe unchecked immigration will strengthen their hold on power. They're perfectly aware that you don't like this, but they don't care. Just yesterday, Nancy Pelosi said it would be, quote, immoral to build a wall that might stop poor people from flooding into this country. Watch.
We have to do something other than building a wall, which you characterize very well. In my view, it's immoral, expensive, ineffective, and not something that people do between countries.
Did you catch that? Securing the border is just, quote, not something people do. Not something decent people do anyway. Bigots do it. So do moral reprobates and anyone else who derives pleasure from cruelty. As MSNBC explained just today, borders are a lot like slavery or the Trail of Tears. Watch.
This is a moral outrage that harkens to the worst excesses in the history of the country, to the separation of families at the slave auction blocks,
yes,
to the separation of Native American families. It is a moral
outrage. And as Laura Bush said, I love you. I really do. I'd like to move next door to you and have coffee.
They're morally outraged. Well, they're always morally outraged, and the point of their moral outrage is pretty clear. America has no right to decide who lives within its borders. Americans lack the moral standing to make that decision. We are too sinful. Illegal immigrants come here because we deserve it. We meddled in their wars in the 1980s. We had the gall to get addicted to the drugs they send us. We once had segregation in the American South. Whatever, the point is this is a fallen country. 22 million illegals within our borders is just the beginning of our penance. Latin America is listening to all of this, and they are getting the message, and that's why they're on their way. Last fiscal year, 94,000 families from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador were detained at the U.S. border. Not one of these people had a right to come in, but they were not deported. Almost 100% of them are still here, and most will never leave. We are powerless in the face of this. Congress could fix it, but Congress refuses to fix it. The system is broken by design. Voters know this, of course. It's one of the main reasons they voted for Donald Trump 2 years ago. They don't hate immigrants, obviously, but they do believe America has a right to decide which immigrants to admit. All countries have that right, don't they? That would be an interesting debate. The Democratic Party and their lackeys in the media don't want to have that debate because they know they would lose. So instead they try to bully the population into silence.
The GOP argument on immigration isn't one that's optimism-based. It's fear-based.
This is a scare tactic, right? This is the president. This immigration is a scare tactic he's using to rev up his supporters.
When you talk about caravan, you're talking about white anxiety. You're talking about old white man angst. And so when they bring up the caravan, that's all we need to do is to bring up the pictures of children being separated from their families.
In other words, shut up, racist. Well, you probably heard that before, too, like every day for the last 2 years. You hear it a lot because it's an effective political tactic, but it only works if you fall for it. You should not fall for it. Most Americans are not racists, not even close. They're decent people. They love their country, they want their country to continue, and they know that will not continue without real borders. Max Burns is spokesman for Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, a group that campaigns on behalf of migration, and he joins us tonight. Thanks a lot, Max, for joining us tonight. So, sort of a macro question first. You acknowledge this is a democracy, and democracies over time probably ought to reflect the will of the people who live within them. The majority of the population overwhelmingly thinks Americans have the right to determine who comes in from other countries. We don't have that right. It's demonstrable. Isn't this anti-democratic, the system that we have now?
I don't know that anyone's arguing that we have to take people in. This is, Tucker, a simple question of enforcing the laws that we already have. I mean, if people like Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush could make the distinction between an immigrant and a refugee, I think it's well within the capability of Congress and the president to make that same distinction today.
But we're not making that distinction. And that's the reason that of the last caravan, as you just heard, which was several months ago, almost every single member who made it within our borders is still here. We're not enforcing our own laws, and that's why we have upwards of 22 million illegal aliens within our borders. The outline's really simple. We don't have control of who's coming in or out. And it's hard to contest that when the numbers are universally acknowledged. So why is that democratic if most people don't want it?
I think it's strange that the people talking about law and order don't want to enforce, say, the Refugee Act of 1980, which was unanimously passed by the Senate, unanimity not something we're used to today, and who don't want to follow the process that's enshrined in our own domestic law to grant at least the application and the right to plead a case for asylum at the border. That's in the law. The problem is that process is not being followed.
Well, it's not, as you know, and I think your argument is disingenuous because you know, because you work on this issue, that the overwhelming majority of people are released within our country and never go before a judge and just stay here. And again, that's why we have 22 million. So when illegals in this country right now, it's part of the reason. So if you see a migrant caravan coming of people who have no documentation and no right to be here, it's a little concerning when the left says, well, wait a second, we deserve them because we meddled in their countries in the 80s, or we take the drugs they send us. The point that you're making and others on the left are making is this is our punishment.
No,
which is what you
Tucker,
clearly think.
You're a supply and demand conservative. You know that there can't be demand without supply. There can't be supply without demand. It's not like this is a one-way street. These are drugs that we are obsessed with as a nation due to a failed war on drugs. And there is something to be said for the fact that we have created this gang violence, this political instability in Honduras and Guatemala.
We've created it.
Through this addiction we have to drugs, and yet we are so hesitant to acknowledge the human cost that's marching toward us.
No, I guess I'm not hesitant to acknowledge the human cost. I'm struck by your hesitance to acknowledge the over 50,000 Americans who died last year of drug ODs. Where do they figure into this moral equation of yours, where we deserve to be invaded because we take their drugs? What about the families of the 50,000 who died? How much time do you spend thinking about them?
All the time. I think they would be much better served using that money we want to spend on a wall for opioid prevention, opioid education, and to rethink this entire country's addiction to heroin, crystal meth, to marijuana. Come on, Tucker, that's more useful than a wall.
Wait. A wall might stem some of the flood of illegal drugs, not all, but some that would save American lives. But that's not a concern to you because why?
Because these people
You're
are
against
seeking,
the wall because you believe it would work.
Because the people in this caravan are seeking asylum status. They're not drug runners. All the pictures that are up right now on the TV are of them checking in at police stations.
You don't know who they are, actually. You have no idea who they are, and neither do I.
Which is why we have a process for hearing their asylum claim. That's why we have a vetting process.
But the macro point is, why do not, hold on, you know as well as I that a wall would give us some control, physical control over our borders. It works, which is why you hate it. Why would you argue against the right of a sovereign nation to determine who comes in? Why? What is your motive in that, honestly?
I think the drugs, you would agree, are going in under the wall and over the wall and on sea routes, not so much through a point of entry like McAllen, Texas.
I'm not sure we know that, but people are certainly going on foot, and a wall would stop some of them. Why would you oppose that?
There was a report on Fox just the other day of a gigantic air-conditioned drug tunnel with a little mini subway in it. So you can't say that it's not like they haven't figured out how to get around a wall.
Yeah, so you just want to save money. You're just worried about federal expenditures. All right, we're out of time. Max, thank you.
Thank you.
Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, also in California, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thank you very much for coming on. I'm fixated on the moral argument here, beneath the policy argument, which is that the United States has no moral standing. The left is saying this. Pelosi said it. The guest I just talked to has said it. We have no moral standing. We have no right to determine who comes into our country because our history is just so bad, so awful, so sinful. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I don't even take it on its own merits, because I don't think they really believe in any consistency. Remember, it was just 30 years ago that the likes of Cesar, it was Cesar Chavez and Bill Clinton and Chuck Schumer.
Who were making the case? Right.
Yes, they were all making the case that the borders should be closed because it adversely impacted minority communities, and that it undermined union wages and entry-level workers. And then when we got 20 million, all of a sudden they said, wow, we flipped California, New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada. This is a good thing. Let's ignore federal immigration law. And same thing with sanctuary cities. They're good now because it fulfills a useful agenda. But believe me, if Alabama and Montana and Utah said, you know what, in our jurisdictions, in our state, we don't want to adhere to federal orders about gay marriage or the Endangered Species Act or federal handgun registration, then all of a sudden that would be nullification and neo-Confederate in the eyes of the left. It's the Kavanaugh hearings all over again. Remember, in a nanosecond, we were going to throw out 238 years of American jurisprudence because it didn't coincide with an agenda for the Supreme Court, and then afterwards, suddenly the good blue wall electoral college that helped Obama get elected had to be jettisoned because it crumbled and gave Trump the election. And senators were wonderful from small states, the same as big states, because Obama had a supermajority in the Senate, and then that was bad. And the 9 justices were good since 1869, and suddenly they didn't flip like they usually do in a Republican. And so it's whatever is useful. The law is fluid and adaptable. It's about power, Tucker. It's not about the respect for the law and the abstract.
Exactly right. And I think a lot of us, including me very often, are far too literal and take these arguments as if they're sincere, which they are not. Professor, thank you.
Thank you.
Across the country, extremists are attacking candidates for office, but of course only of one party. The media's message is to vote for Democrats anyway, or you're a bad person. Much tape on that as the show continues tonight from the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, California. Welcome back. We're coming to you live tonight from Yorba Linda, California. We're actually in the front lawn of the home Richard Nixon was born in and grew up in. I want to bring a new video from Houston, Texas. It shows a man being confronted for ripping up Ted Cruz yard signs. It happened in the wealthy liberal neighborhood of Montrose. Be warned, the video is upsetting in that it shows a lunatic in his natural habitat. Here it is.
I would watch, be careful. You know, I have bought 100 of these. I'm about to put more out.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll feel better about them. I hate Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz.
Well, we're not licensed veterinarians, but it does seem obvious the zombie raccoon virus is spreading outside of the Northeast, so stay safe. Well, despite plenty of examples of violence and extremism and mob behavior from the left, the media have decided to ban the word mob and coalesce around a new storyline. You better vote Democrat or you're a racist, sexist, or literally a traitor to your country.
Quislings meekly march in lockstep behind a morally disabled president. I don't know how you do it. It's appalling.
People are just trying to make liberals scream and cry, and they laugh about it, right? Like there's a mug that they'll hold up, say liberal tears, and they laugh as they drink it. The cruelty is the point of that.
They voted for the cruel person who demeans and diminishes people.
I don't understand how you overlook misogyny, sexism, racism. I don't understand how you can just sit back and say, you know what, all of that's okay because I'm going to get, all of these judges elected or I'm going to get a tax break. I just think that that's not what it means to be American.
Dan Bongino is a former NYPD officer, NRA TV contributor, author of the book Spygate, The Attempted Sabotage of Donald J. Trump. Dan, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. There's been a shift. So Trump got elected, obviously shocked and horrified a lot of people in Washington and New York. But they, for a while, decided to attack him and not the tens of millions of people who voted for him, not the whole middle of the country. Now they are. Now the idea is it's not just Trump who is bad. It's anyone who might support Trump is bad.
Yeah, this is really an incredible phenomenon. I mean, I've never seen anything like this where the media is playing referee solely for one side. It's like a boxing match where, you know, one side's wearing brass knuckles, we're wearing 20-ounce gloves, and they're yelling at us for a kidney punch or something, Tucker. It's ridiculous, but there's a couple of things going on here. Number one, the leftist freak out is basically due to their coin of the realm is state power. And when they lose state power, they're takers, right? They can't take your money. They can't take your health care. They don't have anything else but aggression, right? Now, the media polices that on the right. Matter of fact, the media even makes up stories about, was that commentator you showed us, was she even serious? She's worried about a mug that says liberal tears while Antifa's beating the snot out of people in the, is that, I mean, I'm serious. Is that a serious comment? Like a mug that says liberal tears, why there's actual people getting the crap beaten out of them in the streets. It's absurd.
I want to show you a piece of tape we just got. I think it's from Portland, Oregon. Otherwise a beautiful city, I have to say. Watch this.
Why are you trying to block me? I'm trying to walk here.
I obey traffic signals.
You're a snarky little idiot. Shut the up.
Try something.
I'm not going to punch you. I'm not like your husband. I'm not going to punch you.
I'm not married.
I'm not like your boyfriend or your cop boyfriend who's going to knock you out, so don't worry.
My husband died in 9/11.
Good for him. Good. Good. Those NYPD were a bunch of sodomizing immigrants with their bully sticks. So yeah, your husband probably should rot in the grave.
He doesn't know her. She's wearing an NYPD hat, so he starts screaming at her. My husband died on 9/11, she says. Good, he says. What's going on here?
You know, Tucker, Truck 7 of the Emergency Services Unit, the NYPD, was in the precinct I was in the 75th precinct when I was a cop. They lost multiple members running in those buildings on 9/11 to save people's lives. And this piece of human filth, this disgusting, savage animal, has the gall to say this to this woman who may have lost a loved one there on 9/11. I mean, this is grotesque behavior. And Tucker, you and I both know darn well, and thankfully so, that if that was some conservative from some Tea Party group who had done that to a liberal, he would be banned from any news channel, any Republican group, and polite conversation from now until eternity. Where is the left speaking out with a collective voice? As you pointed out before, they used to be the party of civil liberties, right? Saying this kind of stuff is not welcome. Yeah. Let's get back to ideas. And the media has a role in this too, which they've entirely abandoned.
It does seem the closer we get to an election, the more united the press becomes in its mission, which is to carry water for the Democratic Party. I mean, all the kind of pretense falls away, and they just basically are running a continuous 24-hour-a-day commercial for the Democrats.
Tucker, it's a straight-up power play. It's the reason the immigration argument's covered the way it is as well. This was never about compassion for immigrants. It's not about refugees. This is about votes. They lost votes amongst working-class people, and they're trying to make it up with illegal immigrant votes. This has always been the play.
Yeah. If they cared, they'd be concerned about the tens of thousands of Americans dying every year of drug ODs, but they don't. Dan, great to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Well, if you're conservative, you probably grew up believing the government might be the biggest threat to free expression. Turns out it's not. Big tech, which is more powerful than the government, is. Could Republicans in the Congress take action to protect the public from their influence while they still hold the House? We'll ask one congressman next. Freedom of speech is under threat in this country because the people who hold power have stopped seeing the value of it and other constitutional rights, not to mention the Constitution itself. That is all described, the sad and yet riveting story in a new book called Ship of Fools, still on sale. Well, the ominous tech monopoly Google recently announced it will not work with the U.S. Pentagon on a defense project due to ethical concerns. That problem has not arisen as they work hard to build a censored search engine to help the fascist Chinese government repress its own people. But private messages from Google employees obtained by this program show Google's refusal to help national defense in this country may be for the best. In 2016, shortly after the presidential election, a one-time Google employee called Brian Klimt wrote this, quote, "If the government wants a company to build some software for unethical purposes, we should volunteer to do it. I'd gladly take project management responsibility for such a thing. I promise the deadlines will slip for decades and will never produce anything remotely functional." In other words, he would sabotage it. A Google engineer called Javier Estevez responded by linking to a CIA document giving tips for, quote, simple sabotage. Another engineer called Gary Boyer seemed to like the idea but lamented their strategy would have to remain hidden. Estevez and Boyer still work at Google. We reached out to the company, which commented this way, quote, "What employees say in their personal capacity has no bearing on the way we build or operate our products." They didn't apologize. They didn't explain. Meanwhile, Twitter announced yesterday it won't be banning or even suspending Louis Farrakhan after he made a post that compared Jews to termites. As we've often noted, we don't have a problem with free speech. We support it strongly. We just wish Twitter would extend the same courtesy to people who aren't Democratic stalwarts like Louis Farrakhan. Last month, Twitter took part in the coordinated purge of Alex Jones and InfoWars from multiple online platforms. Twitter suspended many other accounts for reasons it won't fully explain, but which appear to be political. We're against that, of course. The question is, can Congress do something about it as well? Congressman Jim Jordan represents Ohio, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks very much for coming on.
You bet.
Before I ask you about Twitter, I want to ask you what you make of these internal messages from Google that show Google employees apparently joking about sabotaging a Department of Defense project. What does that tell you about how they view the U.S. government and this country?
It shows you how ridiculous the left has become. Limit conservative speech, sabotage national defense, allow anti-Semitic language on your platforms, but restrict conservative speech. I mean, the left, I said this the other day, the left will applaud Colin Kaepernick when he disrespects the flag. They'll cheer on Cuomo when he says America's never that great. And they'll applaud Maxine Waters when she says go out and harass people who support the president. And yet they allow Louis Farrakhan's speech, but restrict conservatives. I mean, this is the ridiculous level we have now gotten to, the absurd level I think we've now gotten to in this country, and it's unfortunate.
Well, it's certainly dark, that's for sure. So Twitter it is the portal through which a lot of people get their news. I mean, it's not just a social medium, it's an important part of our news landscape, and they are obviously political in the way they censor. Does Congress have a role in that?
Well, I think they are political. You know, there are 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate, 535. This summer, 4 got shadow banned. Devin Nunes, Matt Gaetz, Mark Meadows, and Jim Jordan. 4 conservative members of the House. And, of course, CEO Jack Dorsey said, well, it was just a problem, just a glitch in our algorithm. I mean, think about that. So what'd you put in the algorithm? The names Gaetz, Meadows, Nunes, Jordan? I mean, come on, there is no way that is the answer. So this is where we've got, Tucker, we're doing a series of hearings on the First Amendment in the Oversight Committee. And at our most recent one, I asked this college professor, he was a witness for the Democrats. I asked this college professor, I said, on a college campus safe space, could I say this sentence, Donald Trump is president? He began his response with these words, it depends. And I interrupted him. I said, it depends. It's a fact. He got elected November 8, 2016. He was sworn in January 2017. He lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There's no it depends about it. This is the level of absurdity the left is taking us to, and it is a direct attack on the First Amendment.
But, I mean, these companies are more powerful in their technology than the U.S. government. The U.S. government has nothing as powerful as Google, nothing as close. They control our national conversation. They have a chokehold on all human information in English. So why doesn't the U.S. Congress see their clampdown on speech as a threat to all American citizens? I mean, can we do something about this, or do we stand idly by?
No, I think you're right, but I think it's a multiple-step process, and we're at step 1, which is we first need to understand how serious this problem is, how big it is. Is it every single social media platform? There's certainly lots of examples. You mentioned Google. We know what Twitter has done. We know what Jack Dorsey has said. So let's have the hearings. Let's get to the bottom of it. And then you're right. We may have to take action to protect the First Amendment and protect people's ability to speak out in a conservative fashion and not be hindered for doing so.
Yeah, we're a liberal fashion, but to speak. I mean, the First Amendment doesn't mean anything if you can't exercise it.
No, right. I mean, the First Amendment wasn't written just for speech we like. It was written for all speech. But right now, it doesn't seem they allow liberal and they allow all kinds of crazy things to be said, as the Farrakhan example is such crazy language like that. But they're going to restrict conservatives and their ability to speak. It's just not right, and it's something we're going to have to look into.
Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you, Tucker.
The president is speaking tonight in Missoula, Montana. We're monitoring that speech. Should news arise, it may, and if it does, we'll go there. Right now, though, it's time for a special traveling edition of Final Exam. Two California radio show hosts with us here at the Nixon Library, and that's next. Time now for Final Exam, where we choose two world-renowned experts in the news to see who has been paying closer attention to the news over the past week. We're on the road this week in California, so tonight we have a special travel edition of Final Exam. Our two contestants, two of our favorite liberal radio hosts, both based here in California, Leslie Marshall and Ethan Behrman. Okay, contestants, this is a little bit different from the way we normally do it. We have buzzers. Typically, those were confiscated at the airport by the California EPA. Turns out they were plastic, in the same category as straws. So tonight, I'm going to ask the questions, and the first one to raise a hand gets to answer the question. I don't trust myself to make that judgment. We have an independent panel of judges to determine whose hand went up first. You must wait until I finish asking the question before you answer it. Please answer once. I acknowledge you by saying your name. Each correct answer worth 1 point. You get it wrong, you lose a point. Best of 5 wins. Is the math clear?
Yes.
Particularly hard questions tonight. Here they go. Question 1. Which nation became the second place on planet Earth to legalize marijuana nationwide? Ethan Behrman.
Canada.
Canada. Is it Canada? Roll tape.
Canada has gone to pot. Our neighbors to the north legalizing recreational marijuana overnight.
Can't wait to come in and see me buy the first gram in Canada. This is like the most amazing thing ever. How many people get to do that? How many people get to be part of history in the making?
So for an extra point, which you will not actually be awarded, congratulations, you won that.
Thank you.
What was the first country?
Portugal.
Portugal. I think it was Paraguay, but it was definitely started with P.
Okay.
Okay, good. It was Paraguay, says our judge.
Paraguay?
That's an irrelevant question. I couldn't.
No.
Uruguay. We're both wrong. Okay, question 2 before we embarrass ourselves more. Multiple choice here. The filmmaker Michael Moore would like Trump out of office so badly he is trying to recruit famous people, celebrities, to run against him. Moore just confessed that his top pick is A, George Clooney, B, Ben Affleck, C, Tom Hanks. Leslie Marshall.
George Clooney.
George Clooney. Is it George Clooney?
I've asked Tom Hanks twice to run. Yeah. Who doesn't like Tom Hanks? Nobody, right? Tom Hanks would
What does
win.
he say when you ring him and say, please, save the country?
Stop asking me.
Well, he just outed Tom Hanks as someone he speaks to. How'd you like Michael Moore to confess that he talked to you? I think that's mean. Okay, unfortunately, you didn't get that right. I thought you were right. Question 3 comes from the state of Texas. The Senate candidate there on the Democratic side, Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke, is trailing in the polls. He has now decided to win allegiance of voters by doing something brand new. He recently rolled on stage in front of hundreds of cheering teenagers riding what? What was Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke riding? It has wheels. If you were incredibly hip and looked like a young Bobby Kennedy, but grew up near the beach, you might ride this Ethan.
Skateboard.
Is it skateboard? I couldn't help it. I don't begrudge either one of you not guessing that Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke rode a skateboard. I mean, I personally thought it was roller skates, but like, what do I know about politics?
I thought it was a motorcycle.
Yeah, that would have been cool. By the way, maybe gotten my vote. All right, question 4. Again, a multiple choice. Boston Dynamics is a company that makes robots, terrifying robots. Its famous robot dog named Spot has just acquired a brand new talent. What is that talent? Is it A, The robot dog can make pancakes. B, it can dance and twerk to pop music. Or C, it can drive a truck. Ethan.
B, dance and twerk.
It can dance, a dancing and twerking robot dog. Is that a real thing?
Call the police and the fireman, I'm too hot. Make a dragon mama
It was the right guess because it was the one thing America needs.
No question.
Drive a truck, cure cancer. No, twerk.
But now you can arm it and it can, you know, go hunt down terrorists while dancing.
By the way, I mean, that might be worth having. All right, final question. Time to celebrate because there is a new royal baby on the way, apparently. Prince Harry and his American wife are expecting a child. They received several gifts from the government of Australia, including some warm and furry footwear. What kind of footwear was it?
Uggs.
Uggs. Is that an exclamation or is that an... Okay, Uggs. Is it Uggs?
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex receiving their first official gift, celebrating the announcement of an expanding family from Australia. They got a fluffy stuffed kangaroo and a fleeced baby-sized Ugg. It's kind of cute. Probably pick one up at the airport,
So
too.
happy for the royal couple.
Would you take that? Would you, I mean, is that really a present?
Yeah.
It's kind of an insult, right?
No. I think they're made there, right?
I guess. I didn't know that till now.
They have winter in England, so they need baby Uggs, especially
That's a really good point. Ethan Behrman is the winner.
No.
No? What? Ethan Behrman, I think it's 3 points. Ethan, you win. Leslie, you were a great person. And it's great to see you both. Thank you very much for competing outdoors at the Nixon Library here in Yorba Linda. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight's final exam. Pay very close attention to the news each week, particularly the weird news, and then tune in Thursday nights to see if you can outwit our experts. We'll be right back after the break. Well, the Me Too movement has certainly expanded its scope. It started, as you'll remember, with Hollywood producers. That seemed fine. Then it went after actors and performers. And now Me Too seems to be taking out movies themselves. Actress Keira Knightley says she won't let her kids watch Disney princess movies because of the messages they send. Here's what she explained earlier this week.
She's banned from seeing certain children's movies, right?
Yeah.
What are they?
Cinderella, banned, because, you know, she waits around for a rich guy to rescue her. Don't rescue yourself, obviously.
Right.
But Little Mermaid. I mean, the songs are great, but do not give your voice up for a man. Hello? Wow.
And you thought mindless 1970s second wave feminism was over. Nope, it's back in force. Kristen Bell, meanwhile, says she isn't comfortable having her kids watch Snow White because it ends with Snow White being kissed by Prince Charming without prior consent, even though that kiss raises her from death. Better to die than not get consent. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight. Mark, kind of hard to create art within the boundaries of these ideological imperatives, is it not?
Yes, it is. Apparently you're only allowed to have one school of propaganda now. I personally don't let my kids watch Keira Knightley movies because for the last 15 years, sylph like Keira Knightley has taken down entire pirate crews single-handed in Pirates of the Caribbean. When she played Guinevere in King Arthur, somewhat to my surprise, if for anybody who's seen Camelot, this Queen Guinevere covers herself in blue woad and goes into full-blown woad rage and takes out 1,000 hairy Saxon guys single-handed. And if you're asking me which is inherently more ludicrous, Cinderella, where the coach turns back into a pumpkin, or the average Keira Knightley movie where she dispatches single-handedly 1,000 hairy Saxons, I'd have to give it to the coach turning back into a pumpkin. We're all entitled, all this is simply fashion. Fashions in fairy tales. And the feminist fairy tales of Kristen Bell and Keira Knightley are no more inherently unludicrous than anything that's gone before.
There's an awful lot of violence in these feminist fantasies, I notice. So it's totally cool to expose your girls to movies in which women slay people with swords, but it's immoral to let them see movies in which they get kissed?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think if you see someone, for example, this is an important point about the prince and Snow White. You know, if you see someone who's down on the floor and ceased breathing, don't give them the kiss of life, because under the feminist rules, you can't kiss someone without permission. So it's very important just to leave them there dying, as the prince is now expected to do to Snow White. Personally, I think if we're going to remake these things, we should do it the whole way, and we should have, instead of having whatever it is with the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, sleepy, happy, grumpy, we should have Snow White, who makes the mistake of going to a Hollywood mansion, and the Seven Dwarfs are Harvey, Woody, Spacey, Charlie, Rose, and a couple of the other fellas, and go the full way with remakes. But basically, they're exposing what is the problem with their art, so-called, in that it's essentially meant to function as propaganda. And when it's propaganda, it becomes boring. These are universal fairy tales across all cultures. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why Keira Knightley kick-assing 1,000 hairy Saxons is not a prevailing fairy tale across all cultures.
Right. Dark propaganda in which human warmth is outlawed but violence is celebrated. It's pretty sick, actually.
No, that's right.
Mark Stein, great to see
Feminist
you.
violence. Thanks a lot, Tucker.
It's disgusting. See ya. Well, the investigation continues tonight into the disappearance of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. We have an update on that story. Plus, we're watching the president's rally in Montana for any breaking news, and of course, we'll bring it to you when it occurs.
Who said that? Who said that? It's finally a woman. You know, I get it from the men all the time. And so far, every guy that said I love you, they're just not my type. I finally heard it from a woman. Thank you. And look at all the women for Trump signs. Here we go again. It's the same thing. Everyone says, but will he get the women? There are, you know, these fakers on television, the pundits, you know, real geniuses. They've really done well in predicting me. He's never going to run. He has too good a life. He's just doing it for fun. He'll never run, but he's having a good time. I said, that's a good time? So I run. Then September, one by one, we knock them off, knock them off, knock them off. Remember? 18 people, 17 opponents, very talented opponents in many cases. Not in all cases, but in many cases. I remember Charles Krauthammer, and he was talking. Good.
This is a Fox News alert. The president holding a rally tonight in Missoula, Montana. He's rallying support there for Matt Rosendale's challenge to Senator John Tester. Stay with Fox for any news that emerges from that rally tonight. We're on it. Well, international pressure on Saudi Arabia is rising intensely over the disappearance and apparent murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi out of nowhere. For reasons that are not exactly clear, this has become one of the biggest stories in the world, and so we wanted to update you on it. Trace Gallagher has the very latest, and he joins us tonight. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, the president had indicated that whatever happened to Khashoggi wasn't good, but on board Air Force One en route to Montana, he was asked directly if he thinks Khashoggi is dead and said, quote, "It certainly looks that way." Keep in mind, his comments were made after the president was briefed by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who just returned from Saudi Arabia. Pompeo says he told the president that Saudi Arabia should be given a few more days to complete its investigation before the U.S. decides how or if to respond. Watch.
We made clear to them that we take this matter with respect to Mr. Khashoggi very seriously. They made clear to me that they too understand the serious nature of the disappearance of Mr. Khashoggi.
And in turn, when he was asked about the consequences facing the Saudi kingdom, President Trump said this. Listen.
Well, it'll have to be very severe. I mean, it's bad stuff. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Turkish investigators say Khashoggi was killed and dismembered by a Saudi hit team inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Numerous reports say the Saudis will claim his death was an interrogation gone wrong. But now a Turkish newspaper says a top aide and frequent companion of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman entered the Saudi consulate in Turkey hours before Khashoggi arrived. The photo of Maher Abdulaziz Mutreb is the strongest evidence yet linking the Crown Prince to the disappearance of Khashoggi. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks for that update. Murdered, huh? Doesn't sound like something a medieval desert theocracy would do. That's about it for us tonight. We are live at the Nixon Library, a very pretty place here in California. We'll be back tomorrow night, the show that is the sworn but cheerful enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you can. We dare you. Good night from California. Hannity is next with Rush Limbaugh for the hour.
Welcome to Hannity, and we are coming to you from South Florida at the EIB Southern Command headquarters, where for the full hour tonight, I'll sit down with radio legend Rush Limbaugh for a wide-ranging interview on everything that is at stake in November, with just 19 days until the single